You want to start recording?
Okay, we should be live now. Just have a look.
Just refreshing to see.
Oh, it's kill my volume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anne, one sec.
So setting up.
We're there? Yeah.
Yeah, killed me volume.
All right. So we'll give it a little bit of time for people to join, and then we'll kick off. Okay, people are coming in right now, which is good.
How was your training today, Kurt? You did some training?
Yeah, pretty much training every day, like most people now that we're in the lockdown. Yeah, it was good. Just covered off a few forms and done a bit of application and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, we're ticking over, doing daily stuff as well.
Okay. Nice. All right. So we are good. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We have Sifu Kurt Scott, Sifu of Ying Dragon Style, based in Dublin, Ireland. Kurt has been training in Dragon Kung Fu Ying since childhood, achieving Sifu grade at the young age of 19 years old. His training began in Ireland, switching to London, England in his late teens after a full-time move to London, where he lived and worked for 6 years. Back in 2001, Kurt had his first visit to China and Hong Kong, meeting the seniors of his Dragon Style lineage, Chu Chung lineage, Hong Kong, and was overwhelmed by the depth of knowledge they had in the fighting application of the Ying style. This was the bit he felt was not quite complete before his visit. He now trains exclusively in Hong Kong, refining his skill set with his Si Bat Gung, visiting twice per year. Kurt has a very close connection with his Si Bat Gung and Si Gung, whom he sees as the best Dragon Style practitioners he has ever met. And why? So, because after many years of working in security industry as a head doorman on some of Dublin's roughest night spots and growing up in a tough area where fighting knowledge was a must, Kurt's main interest was not pretty forms or winning medals, but actually learning what worked in real life combat situations, and his seniors had this knowledge in abundance. Now in his mid-40s and not looking a day over 40, and running a successful Kung Fu school and traditional Chinese medicine business, where his main focus is on promoting and preserving Ying as it was taught to him, and demonstrating to others that Kung Fu is not just a classical mess, but on the contrary, a very effective and efficient fighting form. His view is that if you find the right style for you, the right master, and you have the dedication required, Kung Fu is second to none for street self-defense and overall health and well-being.
Nice bio, good intro.
I do.
Welcome, Kurt.
Welcome, Kurt.
Yeah.
Really happy to have you. So cool of you to accept doing this, doing a live talk, and not often that we get to speak to a Ying practitioner, a Ying Sifu, and talk about Southern Dragon, and all this for the Southern Mantis group and the wider audience as ability to YouTube. So welcome and thank you.
yeah, it's my pleasure, as I say, Nish, and whatever questions anybody has, I'll endeavour to answer them the best I can, you know.
Fantastic. So let's kick off. Kurt, tell us a little bit about you, your training history, and how you came to start Ying.
Yeah, well, I suppose I started at 9 years old, so as you quite rightly said, I'm going to be 45 this coming Tuesday, so it's a long time ago. It's 36 years ago, and actually 36 years to the day, because I started from my birthday. It was a birthday present, so I suppose like most guys kind of in and around my age, you know, we had all the Kung Fu movies coming out in the kind of, you know, late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, with all the Shaw Brother classics and Golden Harvest, and all that influence really, yeah, I suppose had an influence on me. And I suppose I really always wanted to do a martial art. Being a kid, I wasn't really sure what was the difference between Kung Fu or karate or any of the styles that were out there at the time that were available. But so I suppose I was I suppose I was just lucky that I just stumbled upon Lung Ying. Lung Ying was relatively new in Ireland. It was only brought to Ireland. I was literally there 6 months. And it was actually my mother that was out one day in the city centre doing a bit of shopping, and I picked up a flyer, a leaflet basically, explaining that there was a Kung Fu system in Ireland and it was available. So
this was in Dublin, right?
this is in Dublin, Ireland, yeah. So it would have been on the main street. The school was actually on the main street in Ireland, the O'Connell Street for anybody that's been to Ireland. So I was actually in the basement. It was quite a small, dingy little club that was at the back of a weightlifting gym. But it was ideal. It was perfect, to be honest. And the training was hard, you know. So I literally, for the 9th birthday, I got a month's lessons in the Kung Fu school and a new tracksuit, and off I went.
Yeah. And that was your first introduction to the martial arts in general, or?
It was, yeah. And to be honest, I mean, I've dabbled a little bit in Sway Jiu. I do a bit of Sway Jiu wrestling with my Sifu in France, you know. And that's it really, apart from the Lung Ying. I've done a small bit of Pak Mi, a couple of forms, but I haven't really dabbled too much. I pretty much found a system that I felt suited me in terms of body mechanics and everything else, you know, what I wanted to achieve. So I just started, and I suppose 36 years later, I'm still at it. So wow. I'm not going to give it up now, you know.
Yeah. And you, sorry, go on.
Was it? Did you just? I mean, did your parents kind of push you into doing martial arts, or did you just come home with a fly and say, "I want to do kung fu"?
Yeah, no, it was. They definitely didn't push me into it because my family were more into boxing. We have a bit of a background in boxing. So my godfather would have been a very famous boxer in Dublin, in Ireland. So as I say, all the brothers be quite handy guys. They all doing boxing, and they were good, tough men. And I suppose the natural route was to go into boxing, but it wasn't for me. I just always wanted to do the martial arts, to say, and it was the influence of the movies. I mean, I remember buying all the movies back in the day, you know, Legendary Weapons of Kung Fu, and you had the Hungar Master, the famous Hungar Master, Liu Chia Liang, or Liu Kar Lung, as they call him in Cantonese. And they were my main influences, so I just wanted to do Kung Fu, and I was just pure lucky, as I say, that the mother stumbled upon this leaflet or this flyer, and off I went. I started the martial arts, and that was it. To be honest, I could end up joining that, because I didn't really know one system from another. So it was either destiny or it was luck, one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, going back 30 odd years and to stumble into a haka style in Dublin and Southern Dragon, that's rare. I mean,
gold.
Gold. That's gold. I mean, I mean, and then to stick with it from the day you started training all the way up until now. I mean, that's fantastic. So what was the training like? I mean, at 9 years old, I would imagine as you build up into your teams, the training may have developed, but what was it like? What was your first initial training like?
Yeah, to be honest, it was really difficult and really hard. I mean, anybody that's trained the Hakka systems know that they're not easy, that they're very hard on the body, very rewarding, but you've got to put the effort in. So, I mean, just even remembering back when I was a kid, I mean, I literally remember I was too young to travel on my own at the time, so we lived maybe about 6-7 kilometres outside the city centre. So my mother would drop me in on the bus, and then she'd go off and do some shopping, and then come back and collect me after the classes for 2 hours, which was quite long for a kid, you know.
Yeah.
But the guy that was teaching me at the time was very useful at it, and he was a tough guy as well, and he put no punches just because I was a kid. I trained with the seniors, with the adults, and he would just thrown in.
Wow.
The class generally would be, you know, it would start with just like doing what we call a lung ma, or dragon stance. Mm-hmm. And you'd be pretty much just left in the corner of that for half an hour each leg. And, you know, you start off, legs would wobble, and, you know, some people would fall over, but you just stand there and you try your best to do it. And over the weeks and months and years, you build it up. I do remember sometimes the mother collected me, and not even having to wait till the next day for the soreness to kick in, the lactic acid literally kick in, and sometimes I struggled walking the short distance just from the martial arts school to the bus. The legs would be completely gone. So it was tough training, to be honest.
Can you tell us a bit more about the Lung Ying system for those that may not be too familiar with it? Can you just describe it a bit for us?
Yeah, well, the Lung Ying system, I suppose the principle that it operates on is the system is really based on kind of deflecting power, I suppose. So it's a circular system. So we don't really go head on at anybody. We pretty much move side to side. So it's based on the what would you say, the movement of the dragon. So if you think of a dragon walking or the way a lizard walks, they kind of pace from side to side, sweeping in from side to side. So you pretty much attack from angles. So we wait for somebody to come, and then we'll come in and we'll deflect the movement and then do something, generally from a 45-degree angle. So we'll use their power against them.
Yeah.
So, and obviously then we have ways of generating the power, you know. The main one maybe being the tongue and the toe is the main one for us, which is the swallow and spit.
Yeah.
We do also have the, sinking and rising or sink and float, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be as important in the Lung Ying as the tan and toe, which is really the name, as I say, which is the swallow and spit. That's how we generate the power, you know.
That's interesting that you don't, you know, because we have the four principles or the four dynamics, the, you know, float, sink, swallow, spit, but you put more relevance on the swallow and spit.
We do, because I suppose with the swallow and spit, it's more internal. It depends on what way you look in the system, but in the swallow and spit, it's more about taking the energy down into the lower abdominal, and then spitting it back out. So it's getting your power. Whereas I suppose the foam, the chum, is more about grounding yourself, rooting yourself, concaving the chest, sinking and rising with explosive power. So it is important, but maybe I would say within the form system, the tan and toe is used a bit more. Yeah,
brilliant. That's quite interesting. Do you again within the system? Do you have obviously internal elements? So you have the internal training. You have internal forms, or is it endemic? Is it in all the forms?
Yeah, well, that's just going to say it's kind of like a thread. It just runs through all the forms. So I suppose this is a question that, you know, a lot of people ask, and I've had numbers of good debates with people about this. I mean, I would like to think that most styles of Kung Fu are actually internal. And I think sometimes some people attach too much mysticism and, you know, the whole internal thing, and it's something like, you know, can only be achieved by certain people, and it's you know, it's here, you know, it's so special, when in actual fact it's not. Really all it is the proper breathing techniques. If you actually look at the word Qigong, it just means breath work or energy. So it's just about using the breath correctly while you're doing the forms. So I would say the reason why they say Lung Ying becomes more internal higher on in the system is just purely through experience. You start off, you don't know how to use the breath, you exhaust yourself, you exhaust your chi as you train, and get higher up in it, you just become better at using and knowing how to conserve energy.
I think that's true. I think that's true for a lot of systems, that the training actually helps you build it up as you go along.
Yeah. So that's really, Alex, that's my take on it. That would be my understanding from my seniors as well as to how it works. I suppose first time I had experience of this was really watching my Qigong. When I was in London, I seen it perform. I can't remember what year it was, but it was a long time ago. And I just remember he would have been probably, I'm guessing now, he probably would have been my age at the time, because he's just in his 70th birthday fairly recently. So he would have been mid-40s, I would say, which is, you know, it's relatively young, but it's not, you know, it's not in your prime, I would say. And I watched him do a form on stage, which was very, you know, high-level form, massive amount of energy. And then he just sauntered off, just walked off the stage and wasn't out of breath, wasn't tired at all. And I thought, my God, you know. I'm wrong, because when I finish the form, I can put all the power in, but when I come back, I'm absolutely destroyed. So I thought I'm doing something wrong here, you know. But it's just experience, as you say. It's training every day. There's no secret to it. It'll come when it comes, you know.
So what was your training like up until you kind of achieved that Sifu level? I mean, from 9 to 19 years old,
The training was very physical, very hard. So I'd say it was yeah, very Hagon based. You know, very strong, very brutal. To be honest, a lot of conditioning, a lot of hard training, a lot of weapons training with very heavy customized made weapons. So yeah, it was really brutal, I suppose, and very hard. It's not for the faint-hearted. You know, the club never really retained massive numbers. Started with massive numbers, but people just inevitably fell out because it was just too hard. The training was hardcore. I can remember we used to do seminars where, as you say, the standard session was 2 hours, which was pretty brutal as it was. But we do a seminar once a month where we'd all meet up and you know, we'd all work on our forms and get a little bit extra. And they were generally 8 hours, so it was bloody hard. And we'd only stop for maybe 20 minutes for a lunch, you know, you bring a packed lunch with you or whatever. And generally the day after, I mean, memories I have is going to school, and then later in life is going to work and not being able to walk almost. You know? So I remember one story where we were training so hard at a seminar that I was only starting to drive actually. And I think I was 18, I got a car quite young, and I couldn't drive home from school because I was literally that shaky, and I was literally worried that my foot was going to slip off the clutch.
What sort of training can someone expect doing Long Ying? I mean, obviously you have your Long Ying Ma, but what sort of techniques are you looking at? I mean, what sort of forms do you have? Do you have 2-man drills? Is there a lot of conditioning focus on the whole body?
Yeah, well, I suppose the standard class now with myself would be very similar to what I started with. So it'd be, you know, a lot of static stance work, building the legs up. We'd have a lot of walks up and down the hall. So basically, you know, most of the Kung Fu skills that I've had, I would make sure I had at least 100 feet hall, 80 to 100 feet because we needed, because we'd walk up and down the Long Ying Ma, picking out singular techniques. So we might pick something out like the side cue or the cow peck or the bike in, some of the techniques we have, the walk up. And we'd pretty much drill those up and down, we'll be correcting the guys. So we might do that for a half an hour. Then we'll break up, then we'll partner up, and you can expect the guys then to do man-to-man training, so to speak. So actually using the technique, with me going around instructing and telling them how to use the proper application of the technique, which for me is paramount. No, a lot of Kung Fu skills don't emphasize enough on the actual application, which to me is unfortunate. Because otherwise forms are, I suppose, just a dance. And that's getting back to the little intro there, which was, I think it was Bruce Lee who said it was a classical mess. But I think he definitely didn't look at the Hakar arts. But I think, you know, if it's done right, you should have at least some application training in your class. And then after the application, you probably expect to do some forms. If you're up on that level, we'll drill the forms. And again, with the forms, it's a case of drilling the forms, doing them the best you can, getting standard correction, and then breaking down the form that you can use every single movement in it. And if you don't have an understanding of the movement that's in a form, well then that's either the failing of the Sifu or the failing of the student. It should be there, you know.
Yeah. How many forms? Sorry, how many forms are there in the system?
Yeah, it's quite a long system, Long Ying, and it can depend on lineage as well. Like, some lineages have some other forms that maybe they got from other places or whatever, or maybe they'll be retained from the original. I'm not sure. I know with my lineage, as niche there is the Chuchong lineage coming from Lam Chan Kong, who was Lam Yi Kwai, the founder's son. Yeah. We would have 15 hand forms approximately. And then approximately eight weapons forms, so about 23. Right. So too long, you know.
Mm. And what would be the first form that you would learn in Long Ying? So with Chao Guai, your standard one is Sambo Jin. It's probably one of the first forms you would learn. What would be the first form that you would learn in Long Ying?
Yeah, again, the first form would be one of the original forms that came from the Taoist temple. So it would be Suk Luk Dung, which is roughly translates to 16 movements. And that'd be the most important form. It's the starter form. It's one of the most important. It's basic, but it's a core form. It's a root form. you would always go back and train it because it teaches you the basic body mechanics that you need, the power generation, the stance walk, everything's really in it, even though it's quite short.
Yeah, right. It's a bit like Jikbo in Patmay and Samba Jin in Jalga. Mantis.
Yeah, very similar. You know, I've
Those
seen it.
first forms contain all the seeds of the system, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to be, you know, that'd be the starter form. Generally, it depends on the Sifu, but certainly how I was taught, I was left probably just doing stance walk for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I pretty much didn't learn anything for maybe 2 years. It was a lot of stance walk and then a lot of focus on, as I say, picking out individual techniques that, to be honest, it was a good system because the individual techniques are all going to be used in the forms anyway. Yeah. So if you can build them up and get an understanding of them and how they walk and build the muscles that it takes, because you use strange shapes in Hakka systems, you know, and the muscles are not necessarily naturally there. They don't develop naturally. So you do really need to, you know, have that time. I know we're kind of in an automatic culture now where everybody wants everything very fast. So I've got some younger students, and you know, to tell them that they're going to have to do, you know, Lung Ying Ma for 2 years it's probably unrealistic. So I've kind of modified the class slightly, you know.
Yeah, it's not an easy one. I mean, when we started training, it was the same stance work, up and down, and sansao, and then your foundational stuff like Sambo Jin, the Chai Sai grinding arm and Dojong, and I pretty much did that for years, but that was it. And then it wasn't until later, once you'd had your Sifu correct your lines with the sansao, correct your technique with your ma, correct your technique with all of the foundational stuff, that once you got to the high level forms, it just fit in. You kind of knew how to use your waist, or how that power generation worked, or how that sansao worked, because you've already done that. You've broken the sansao down individually. So when it came to doing the form, you already had the application in mind. So you weren't just doing a form for the sake of doing the form. You already had the two-man application of those techniques. So as you got to the high levels, because you'd done the foundational stuff, you got to it, and your form became a lot more alive. So you weren't rushed. You built up to it. So
yeah, I think something my Sifu said was as well, like that you train this stuff, the foundation stuff, you train it for until it's part of you, and then when you're shown something new, you almost already know it because you've done it so much, you know, so much of the foundation work that you can pick this new stuff up quite easily because you've got the mechanics, you've got the understanding, you've got the attitude. So it comes a lot easier when you've got a good solid foundation.
Exactly, Alex, and you know, and I agree with what Nish was saying as well. If you put the time in at the early stages on the foundation stuff, it'll stay with you for life. It can be tedious and even boring at times, and getting back to what I said, being a kid and you know, watching kung fu movies, I thought I was going to go in and be doing backflips and jumping, spinning kicks, and you know, all fancy stuff that everybody wanted to show off in the schoolyard kind of thing, you know. But I very quickly realised that, you know, the style was actually something special. I just needed to stick with it and work hard. And once you get the stance down, as you say, you know, the whole foundation is there. Once you've got a strong foundation, you can build on it. You want on it, really. So
you must have been like one of the only kids in your school doing like
a traditional art.
Doing traditional art. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, even now, even as we speak, traditional kung fu is still a rarity in Ireland and in Dublin. There's a couple of guys now over here. There's a Mantis guy, Gary Cassidy, who I think is not well. I think he trains under his Sifu.
Heard of him, yeah.
There's another Mantis guy here.
Yeah.
You know, there's a few guys. There's a Charlie Foot guy here, Adrian Kern. So there's a few traditional systems now.
Right.
But I suppose back when I started training, there was pretty much nothing. Lung Ying, that was it. There was a couple of skills that called themselves kung fu, but at best they were, you know, they were made up.
Karate was quite popular in Ireland as well, right?
Yeah, karate was big in Ireland, and particularly Shotokan and Wateroo.
Yeah.
My two older brothers actually trained. They trained Wateroo with a fairly useful master over here. who's moved on since. His name was Wasaki. He was a famous Japanese master who trained under a guy called Tatsu Suzuki. It was, I think, based somewhere around Birmingham in the UK, and they were high level guys. You know? So Waterloo was very popular. And it was a good art, to be honest. You know?
We've got a question in the group actually, and it flows quite nicely. A question from Ardle. My question for Sifu Kurt is this: how does he keep his motivation, passion, and dedication from waning after so many years of teaching and practicing?
Yeah, I suppose, look, that's probably an easy enough one for me to answer, believe it or not. It really depends on how you look at the martial arts. You know, I've taught a lot of people over my life. I've trained with a lot of people, so I've seen a lot of students come and go, whether it be training partners or students. And I suppose for me, really analysing it, what makes the difference is what Kung Fu means to you. So to me, it's not a hobby, it's not a pastime. For me, it's very much so. Maybe religion's a strong word, but it's a lifestyle. So it's something that pretty much, it's ingrained in me now. I think it influences everything I do. I've managed to be quite successful, thank God, in my working life. And I would even put that success down, I suppose, the confidence, the commitment, the diligence that I've got to Kung Fu. So, yeah, I suppose, for me, it's not a question of, you know, ever giving it up. It's ingrained in me now, and I live and die with it. And that's it, I suppose, you know.
Brilliant.
Kurt, do you mind giving us a little history of Lung Ying? Like, where did it originate and who was the creator, if you know that? Yeah,
of course. Yeah, certainly. I suppose I'll give you the stuff that's hard to prove first. So there's some stuff that maybe is non-factual, but nevertheless it's out there. And that'd be true of a lot of hacker arts. So I suppose Lung Ying, you would say, was invented around the 1700s. And there was a monk called G Simsi, which was a Taoist monk. Now, depending on what story you believe, and again, as I say, this is kind of sketchy stuff, so it could be true, but we don't really know, because most of these, you know, facts or whatever, or non-facts, were passed down verbally, so we don't really know.
For sure.
But if it is true, monk G.C. Sim was meant to be one of the 5 elders of Shaolin, I suppose, and Pak Mi being one, and so on and so on. There was another one called Ni Mu, I think it was the nun that was accredited with
Wing Chun. Yeah.
Wing Chun.
Yeah.
So anyway, apparently this monk, GCMC, lived in the Shaolin Temple, the original Shaolin Temple in Henan province. And apparently when the destruction of the Shaolin Temple was on, the Qing dynasty was basically burning down the temples, that he basically fled and made his way down south, down to Fujian first, to the southern Shaolin Temple, later leaving there and then making his way further on down into Wasai Toi, which was where Lamy Kwai learned his Lung Ying. So that was the Taoist temple that would have been on the mountain Laofu Shan, which was where Lung Ying was based. So that's the kind of, I suppose, the stuff that's hard to prove, whether it's actually true or not. I mean, it's going back a couple of centuries, 2 or 3 centuries, so it's kind of hard to prove it. But what we do know for definite is that there was definitely a monk called Doi Yuk. It was a Taoist monk again, and he was based, as I say, on the mountain of Laofu Shan, in the temple of Wasai Toi. And he would have been the monk that taught Lamy Kwai, who was the first non-monk or layperson the inherited style of dragon or Lung Ying.
Right.
So I suppose that would have took place. Lamy Kwai, I suppose, who was, we see as our Sijo, you know, the father of the style, for many reasons, because he only got so many sets from the temple. He brought them out, he added them to what he knew, and created dragon style as we know it now.
Yeah.
So he was born around 1870, Lamy Kwai, and I think would have went to the temples when he was only about 16, and he was already an accomplished martial arts teacher and fighter at that stage. And he learned all the sets off Doi Yuk, the monk, within, I think, 5 years, space of 5 to 7 years, and then basically brought it back out of the temple and spread it around the area where Lam Yu Kwai was from, which was called Wai Jiao.
Yeah.
So we taught around Wai Jiao where it was from, and then I suppose, like everybody, the lord of the big city, he moved to Guangdong to try and make a few pounds in the 1920s and opened many schools there. So that's kind of the rough history of it. So it comes from Doi Yu. That's the piece that we definitely know. And as to say, the earlier stuff with the Five Elders is a little bit sketchy, but
yeah, it's the same. It's the same in every kung fu film as well, isn't it? You know, you get these stories of the Five Elders, but I think a lot of the systems, Hakka systems, have those stories, and it's just very hard to know because there's no written histories of some of this stuff, you know. But it's Taoist linked, yeah. It's a Taoist root.
yeah, it's the monk that would have taught Lam Yu Kwai was, as I say, Doi Yu. He was a Taoist monk, and the sets that he would have taught Lam Yu Kwai were Taoist sets.
Right.
And then some people would say I had a Shaolin influence, but that's going back, as I say, to the Five Elders. So whether that can be proved or not is anybody's guess.
Yeah.
And then we would also have the Hakka influence because, as I say, Lam Yu Kwai would have put what he learned, which was the Lam Guard, the Lam family style that he learned from his father and his uncles. He would have added that in, plus Hakka Kyun, which was the village style, the village fist.
So he was Hakka. Lam Yu Kwai was Hakka.
He was Hakka, yeah. He was Hakka. So he would have added what he knew from those two systems. And as I say, he was already a pretty accomplished fighter. So the story goes that basically Lam Yu Kwai was at the foot of Lo Fo Shan doing a kung fu demonstration and basically getting new students. He was only a young guy at the time. He had some of his students there, and that the monks from Wasatoi had made their way down and were watching the demonstration. And again, there's maybe one or two different stories, but the one I got was that basically some of Lam Yu Kwai's students ended up being challenged by a couple of the younger monks from the temple, and were beat quite quickly and efficiently. And at that stage, Lam Yu Kwai went to question Doi Yu, who was the abbot of the temple, and asked him, you know, what was the system. He'd never seen that in a move like the way he was zigzagging and, you know, the sinking and rise and all that type of stuff, and was basically invited to come back to the temple to train. But fighting, he stayed there full time. So he had to go and ask his father, who agreed and said, yeah. And so the story goes, he lived full time in the temple for 5 to 7 years, somewhere in around that period, and took the whole system basically then, you know.
Yeah, because I was doing some research and it said that Lam Yu Kwai had studied Hakka, Shaolin, and Taoist form. So Lung Ying has those elements to it, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it has the three elements, but as you say, the Shaolin one is the one that's a little bit sketchier because you've pretty much got to believe the story of the monk from Iran, which was Ji Sim T. You've got to believe that that's a true story. Some of the stories would actually even say that Ni Mu, who was the nun that was accredited with Wing Chun, also invented dragon style. Again, it's open to interpretation, you know. But there's less facts around that, I think.
Have you been to Weiyang? Have you been to Weiyang in China? Is there dragon still there? Are there dragon schools in Weiyang?
Yeah.
Yeah, Wai Jiao.
Oh, Wai Jiao. Sorry, yeah. They're next to each other now. They're blended into each other.
I've been to the Lam village, and I've been there, and I've seen the Lung Ying temple, and yeah, I mean, there's pretty much not much left now. There's really only a rock as such, you know. Everything was destroyed, but but the presence is still there, the spirit of it, and obviously the style was, you know, was created there by Lam Yu Kwai, so there's still a large number of practitioners, and there's, you know, the spirit of it is there. So it's a great place to see, I suppose.
Is the main sort of home of Lung Ying Hong Kong now, or is it still kind of where Lam Yu Kwai set up schools?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, again, far be it from me to annoy anybody. I don't want to get on the wrong side of anybody. But I would say that the Lung Ying in particular, and indeed some of the Hakka systems, were stronger in the areas where the masters fled them. So the likes of Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, anywhere where they basically fled, escaped the regime.
Yeah.
Where their styles kind of flourished and became stronger. So certainly there's a lot of lunging skills in Hong Kong, and the standard is very, very good. The standard is also very, very good in China, but it looks a little bit different to me. Probably because it's when Lam Kuai taught in Guangdong, he would have been a much younger man. So maybe the style would have been much more physical based. And by the time he got to Hong Kong, he maybe refined his style. And it looks a little bit more, to me, a little bit tighter, a little bit sharper, there's a bit more power or speed to the forms.
Right.
They're less swingy, I suppose, is the best term I can put on it. But that's just my interpretation of it.
Of course. Got another question here from Amy Thompson. It says, what's your favourite lunging form to perform and why?
Well, I suppose that's obvious. Anybody that knows me in any way knows every time I go to Hong Kong or China, I perform the Mo Q. The Mo Q for me is just got, I suppose, got a special place in my heart. If I'm being honest, I think it's a great form. It's one of the core forms, one of the sets that came out of the temple. It's a practical form, and that's why I like it. It's one of those forms that you can break down every single movement in it, and you can see how easily it can work, how easily it can be very effective in a given situation, in a fight scenario. So it's just a great form, you know. It's a hard form, but if you train it hard, it definitely works for you.
Yeah, and you get the rewards from it by putting the effort in, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that the one? There's some back stamping. You stamp with the back leg. Yeah,
it's again, we don't really use the stamping ging or power.
Yeah.
I know it's in some systems. With the Lung Ying, it's the feet are meant to flow more. It's meant to glide more. Right. So it can look like the leg is coming up quite a bit, but it's not meant to. You meant to glide across the floor, so you kind of more or less retain the contact with the floor.
Right.
If you lift the foot too high, you can lose the contact. You can off balance yourself. And if you're caught in that moment during the strike, you can be very easily, knocked over. So, yeah, it's more of a gliding step, I suppose.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
Could you talk about some of the key forms and what they teach?
Yeah, well, obviously, we said the Sublab Dung is the main one, so that's the first one that's going to teach you basically your root, your foundation, how to use the ma, how to use the step, how to use the big bow, which is the forcing step or the driving step.
Yep.
So the big bow, for anybody that wouldn't understand it, it's a half step. It's like a shuffle. So it related, I suppose, probably the boxing shuffle, I suppose.
Mm.
And then we've got the full step, which is pretty much moving side to side. That's the Lung Ma. So I'll teach you that. I'll teach you the body mechanics of the tand, the toe, the float, the sink, and what have you.
Yeah.
Fall and shove. I'll teach you all those principles and concepts. And then as the forms go on, the next form then is Sub G Kun, which is kind of a bridging form. So it's really not that much more difficult than the Sublab Dung. It's just a couple of angles in it.
Yeah.
Because the Sublab Dung is very linear. It's up and back.
Yeah.
And then we use Sub G. And then the most important form after that then is Santong Go Kyu, which is the 3 bridges. That's a fairly important form. Again, it's one that came from the temple, the Tower set. Again, very useful form. Everything in it is useful. There's nothing in it that's, as you say, all killer, no filler. It's
all right.
All killer, no filler.
Yeah, it's a brilliant set,
Yeah.
And it's a big step up in fairness for people. It's like, sometimes I often think to myself, the Lam Koi was being a bit cruel because you just go from Sub G, which is kind of, it's easy enough, and then all of a sudden you're into Santong, and there's lots of angles and there's lots of different stances, and There's lots of different hand movements that are quite complicated and complex. And so, yeah, the Samtong's quite hard. I suppose where you get out of Samtong is the first appreciation of application of combat, how to actually use it as it was designed to use. So I suppose Lung Ying at its core is a very effective street fighting system. It's not a pretty system. I mean, we're not going to win any medals for, you know, best performance in a wushu competition by any means. It's not showy. It's not flash. It's very much so a practical system. It was designed to fight multiple opponents. The reason why we attack from angles. It assumes that you're not always going to be the biggest guy, the strongest guy in the fight. So that's why we don't meet power with power. So we very much so use a coiling system where we recoil and come back at you. So you will get all that from Samtong. So it's a very in-depth form and needs a lot of practice. So that's generally a form that you'd be left on for a couple of years to get a good understanding of it. Then we have a whole host of other forms. After that, we have Dan Bin, then Simon Toy, Manfu. These are all just kind of extensions of Samtong. They're pretty much similar, not too many different movements. Then you start going into kind of the intermediate type stuff where we go into the Sai Q form, which is, as everybody knows what Sai Q is, a smash and bridge.
Yeah.
It's a very effective form, short, sweet. And then, well, it depends on what school you're in, what lineage. Some people will teach the more Q at that stage. I put a little bit more importance in the more Q, so I teach Yin Jiao first. Yin Jiao is very good form again. A lot of movement and a lot of side angles. A lot of up and down on the stance walk, so retreating back almost to a kneeling position. So almost fighting from being knocked down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
So Yin Jiao is a very useful form. And then we go into more Q, which is, I suppose, the signature form or the benchmark form. It's the form that if you get there, you're accepted then more or less after a long time as a student. You're accepted by the rest of your peers as Dragon style.
Right.
So that's the significance that's on that form. And for me anyway, and why I'm hesitant to teach it to people unless they're going to put in a massive effort.
How old were you when you learned Morkyu?
Morkyu, I would have been, I think, 16.
Oh.
Wow.
Again, that would have been very, very young, very unusual. But if I'm being honest, I was very dedicated. I would have trained every day. I mean, for hours, for as many hours as there was left. So even when I was in school, I'd be doing bits, you know, lunch break. And then it was literally, you know, sprint home, the bag was thrown off, and I was out to the shed or out to the back garden to train. Then I'd cycle to the train, and I'd make my way in whatever way with the mother when I was younger, and then I'd be training again. And that was pretty much me. It was my lifestyle all the way up. So it was all training. So yeah, I learned Morkyu pretty young. Did I master it young? Absolutely not. Have I mastered it now? I don't know.
Never satisfied. If you're too satisfied, it kind of stops your growth, doesn't it?
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I'd be fairly self-critical, so I'd always be my own worst critic. Even when I perform, I'd look back at forms and think, that's not great, you know. But I think that's a good thing as well, as you say, Alex. You know, it keeps you on your mark. It keeps you on the ball with what you want to achieve, and you know, it drives you. Once you're goal orientated, you'll keep achieving.
There's always another level. There's always another layer to find and to reach, isn't it?
Absolutely.
One question from Stephen Worcester says, well, he asked how many weapons are there, and you said 8 weapon forms.
There's 8 weapons, so pretty much the sequence that I teach them in will start with the Kwon Do. So the Kwon Do is the first one,
right?
Which is the general spear, if anybody doesn't know. So it's the nasty looking weapon.
Yeah, big blade.
Then after that, I teach the Shun Do, which is the butterfly knives, the Chinese butterfly knives.
Right.
After that, then I teach the short pole form, which is a really good form as well. Then I teach the hoe form, which is like a traditional garden hoe.
Right.
Those are farming implements that was a adopted into the style. Maybe out of necessity. I don't know where it came from.
Probably Hakka influence, isn't it?
Hakka influence. I mean, the Hakka people, if anybody knows the history of them, they were kind of nomadic. You know, it came down from northern China, I think. More than best life, I suppose, is the easiest way to put it in southern China when they first settled. So I think that's where Hakka Kyun came from, Hakka Fist. They had to devise a system that was good for protecting them, I suppose. As I say, there was probably a lot of I suppose you could call it racism towards them. They weren't liked in the area at the time, you know.
Yeah.
So that's where the Ho, and after the Ho, then I teach. Let me get me burns now. I'm going off that. After the Ho, so what have we mentioned? Kwon-Do, Shun-Do, short pole.
Pa?
Yeah, the Ho. Sorry, I teach bench then, so I teach bench form.
All right, you've got bench form.
Got a bench form. We got a straight sword, so the Jian.
Okay.
Got my favourite form then. My favourite weapon form is the Tiger Fork.
Which was going to be my next question, but yeah, the Tiger Fork. Yeah, you've got a new one. Happy birthday.
Yeah, I got a nice one. I got a nice one for the birthday. So I'm a bit of a weapon collector. I'm a bit weapon mad, you know. So. I love weapons, but I love the Tiger Fork for many reasons. I suppose because it's a very functional weapon. And again, I suppose what system you train, the form might look different, but certainly the Lung Ying set, it's very useful form. Obviously, the prongs on the fork, it's very good for trapping weapons. You can very quickly disarm somebody. You can pin people down with it, and that's where it got its name from, for trapping tigers. Which I wouldn't fancy trying, but I think even me with a Tiger Fork, I'm going to run the other way. But so that's pretty much the Tiger Fork, and then we got the long pole, of course, which is very difficult form. You don't see it perform too much in Lung Ying, for the reasons that it's reserved for Sifus. So normally you wouldn't be classed. I don't want to say the word proper, but you wouldn't be classed a genuine Sifu unless you had learned the long pole. Once you've mastered, or well, at least learned the long pole, well, then you can say you're a Lung Ying Sifu.
Right.
That's pretty much all the weapons, I think. I don't think I've forgotten that. Yeah, that's it. So about 8 weapons. I think I covered them all there.
Got a question from Yasa. How similar is Lung Ying to Pak Mei, as both the great grandmasters were cousins and best friends? Yeah,
I suppose firstly, with Pak Mei and Lung Ying, it's true to say they're sister systems, or you know that both the Si Zhous, Lamy Kwoi and Chun Lei Chun were, I suppose, really good friends. Related through marriage, as you say, so cousins through marriage, and best friends growing up. They grew up in pretty close to each other. Chun Lei Chun would have learned Lung Ying first. He would have learned, well, not the Lung Ying, but he would have learned the lam fist, the lam guard on.
Yeah.
Lamy Khoi's father. So yeah, they had a very strong relationship together. How similar are the styles? I suppose aesthetically, to the untrained eye, they look almost identical. They look very similar, but in actual fact, they're not really. And once you get to the upper levels of the systems, you realise that they're actually quite different.
Internal dynamics, the internal engine. Is it?
It might be. It's the internal engine, but also I suppose it's the power generation. Yeah, it's the difference in the root. So Lung Ying we tend to have a much lower stance. We sink our stance more. So we lower our centre of gravity, so drop our centre. Pak Mei tend to stand a lot higher. From my understanding and from what I've seen as well, and as you say, I've done a little bit of Pak Mei with a Pak Mei master here in Ireland, who's very good, William Loke, and he pretty much taught me Jik Bo, which is the main, the starting set. He taught me Go with Toy and Yin Jiao Lin Q, which is essentially a set of Pak Mei that they got from Lung Ying. Lamy Kwoi gave to Chun Lei Chun. Essentially, MRQ reworked to suit their body mechanics. And
do you see similarities, or have they diverted considerably?
No, there's definitely similarities, but as you say, our stance would be lower. So
Now, in those forms, in the form that you learn.
in the forms, yeah, there would definitely be similarities, particularly the charging part at the start where we come up pretty strong with a cow peck and a boy game. It's kind of a charging step, and then it was retreating step with the malt cup. They would have something very similar. The malt cup has changed to a chop, so kind of a chop hand or a beggar fist. I don't know what you want to call it, beggar hand. So it's slightly different, but yeah, there's definitely similarities. But I could see how it was reworked to suit Pak Me.
Yeah, interesting.
Pak Me as well, I suppose. For me, and this is purely based on what Pak Me is about. Pak Me comes from the tiger style. So they tend to use. I don't know if you can see me because very small screen here, but from what I can see, a lot of Pak Me practitioners got very strong shoulders. So you wouldn't fancy doing groin and arm, but they seem to got really big shoulders here. They've got very powerful shoulders because everything seems to come out like this, very like the tiger. That kind of this step of the tiger. They seem to use the shoulder a lot more. Whereas in Lung Ying, we fix the arm. So Lung Ying is about the waist. That's how we generate most of our power in actual fact. Not just the swallowing and spitting, but we use the power at the waist, so it's kind of waist centric. So we will fix the arm over the rib cage and we deflect stuff. So we would tend to move, but the arm won't move. We move the waist. So the waist will move and the arm will just follow like a lever. So, I mean, they're the subtleties that when people say to me, Pak Me not the same as Lung Ying, I say, no, absolutely not. And again, aesthetically, Pak Me, and again, I don't annoy anybody, I have loads of Pak Me friends, particularly in London and Hong Kong. Pak Me, to me, is a bit more choppy. So they use a lot of shock power, a lot of short power. They kind of stop after it and then go again. So it's kind of bump, one, and go. Whereas Lung Ying is designed to be circular, so we kind of flow. We just keep going.
Right.
So we kind of recycle the power and move and move and move. So there's not. Sometimes you can look at the form and think, well, that guy is not actually as powerful as the Pak Me guy. They're saying because it's a different way of expressing power.
Of course, yeah.
So, and then again, it's an important point because that translates into how you fight. So Pak Me is the linear system, which I should have said as well. So they pretty much go on the premise of this guy comes to me, I'll go straight in, I'll smash him to bits, side cues everywhere, and I'll take him out of it. Whereas Lung Ying pretty much will deflect, come in from the side, and just keep hitting and hitting, recycling the strike until hopefully we put him down, you know. So yeah, the sister system, but I was saying no, definitely not.
What would you say is the main power of Lung Ying, and then the main method of generating that power?
It's pretty much back to what we just spoke about. The main power is definitely that whole, swallow and spit. Yeah. So pulling back in, shooting back out, and the sink and rise. So dropping the stance and bringing it up very fast. Yeah. And we'll use that depending on both ways. So we'll use the rise and power to throw our strike out to make us more powerful than we actually are. But we'll also use the sink and pull somebody down. So use the body mechanics to take somebody in, pull them into us. And that kind of gives them, I suppose the best way I can describe it is like whiplash in a car.
Yeah.
You jerk them forward very violently, where they come in on top of you, come in, you've met them with your striking hand.
That's
so
right.
that maximizes the power.
Yeah.
Got the fact that you pulled them in, you're now rising up as fast as you can. You're also using the waist. So we use the waist because we're dragons. So we build the waist from day one. Yeah. So you're also using the waist to rise, and also the power of him coming in on top of you, pulling his own momentum in. So all those factors come together to make you much more powerful than you actually are, you know. So it's a clever system.
It's that's what the trained power is, isn't it? All that effort that you put in to learn that foundation of how to move and how to have your body structure is designed to for that point to generate the maximum power from those movements.
Absolutely, and that's why I say, I suppose, and maybe another point I'll cover is, I suppose when I went to Hong Kong, and I know he's probably going to cover this, but I'll just throw this in now while I have it in my head. When I went to Hong Kong the first time and see Bak Wong perform, and I see Bak Wong, Quan Yu Lung, he would be the chairman of my lineage. He's the head guy, I suppose, the most senior. And when I first seen him perform, I thought, well, that was literally it. I thought, this is absolutely brilliant. I haven't seen that like this at all. And the first thing obvious to me was that his moves were very tight, very short, great snap power, shock power, sacred power, whatever you want to call it. Everything was very tight, and as I say, refined. So that started me thinking, right, what am I doing wrong here? Some of my moves are too big. Okay, I got good power, and I knew I had good power. I thought if I hit someone with a cow peck, they're probably going to go down. Well, I actually knew they would. Because I worked indoors for a living, and on occasion I had to use it. So I knew I had good power. But at the same time, I was, I suppose, humble enough to know what my Bak Wong was doing was much better than what I was doing. I knew pretty much just by looking at him, well, if I had to go up against him, I think I'd last seconds, you know? So after a good conversation with him, basically what he came to was that you got 4 levels in Lung Ying. That basically you got beginner level, which, you know, we started off. Then you got the intermediate level where you're just training, you're getting better every day. And then you got the advanced level, which we all strive towards. And this was pretty much where he put me when I first arrived out in Hong Kong. He was like, you're definitely at advanced level. You've got good forms, you've got good structure. They would call your stance a horse. You know, I just heard that term before, but they would tend to use you've got good horse, right? So I've got good stance. So obviously you've got all that, but what you don't got is the expert level. That's the next level. And I was like, well, what is expert level? And it was pretty much what he was doing. It was tightening up and sharpening all those little movements that there's no extra movements. When you block something, it's done. The block becomes the strike. Yeah. So at the higher level, a lot of the moves are done with one hand. So you pretty much can parry and block and strike with one hand. You know, and the evasiveness of the feet. So we use a lot of parrying, a lot of deflecting blocks. The feet, again, crucial. I mean, you look at even modern, you know, boxers. They got no footwork, they got nothing. So, again, the footwork. These were all the things we focused on, just tightening up and sharpening up. And so that's pretty much where I am now when I go out. Is I finished the Lung Ying system, so it's just a matter of tightening up all the movements and refining everything, you know.
Yeah. So is it that refining, that shortening of the movements is to develop shorter power, less movement, but generating the power still?
Yeah, less movement, knowing where the power comes from, I suppose, what muscles you're using, what body mechanics you're using, how to tighten her up that it's very effective and there's no extra. I got one senior as well in Hong Kong. He was one of the most senior guys out there, a gentleman called Li Fu Xiao. His sons also teach in London, by the way, teach Dragon, and they're very good. And he would always say to me, you know, it's that half second. That's what makes the difference in fighting. So keep emphasizing this to me, you know, the half second. Even when I'd parry something, he'd say, why do you try and grip it? You know? I say, well, I don't feel it. He'd say, no, well, by the time you gripped it, the guy's already countered and hit you. Yeah. So things like that has become, you know, very important to me, studying the finer detail and listening to the guys that know. Li Fu Xiao was in his 80s now, and he's a chronicle, I suppose, of knowledge. So I listen to these guys, and fairness, they've got the goods.
What took you to Hong Kong? So you went, your first time to China and Hong Kong was in 2001, is that right? Yeah,
2001. So I suppose pretty much what happened was,
you saw your Qigong perform, and then did you go up to him and say, I want to come to Hong Kong? Is that how it happened, or did you just...
No, I didn't actually. I hadn't seen him perform before I'd gone to Hong Kong. And this is going way back, I suppose, when, I'm not sure, did we have internet back then? I don't know. Did we have good phones? But I know certainly I hadn't seen that online, so I pretty much, I only knew him by name and the odd photo, you know, because you got to know your lineage. So I suppose I started training on, as I say, at a pretty young age. I moved to London when I was about 17, I think, very young. spent about 6 years over there working, again doing bits of door work over in London, and working for my Qigong, Kung Fu, Zhang, who's the man that brought Dragon Style to this side of the world, you know, brought it to the UK and Ireland.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so he was my he'd be my Seaback Gong's C-Guy, his junior classmate. So I suppose after talking to him and living in London and what have you, and after a number of conversations and coming back here, knowing my own skill, I was talking to Qigong one time, and I was basically like, you know, I feel like I've plateaued. And I always remember saying that to him. I feel like I've got as good as I'm gonna get, and you know, I need instruction. And my Qigong was a very business orientated guy. He's a very successful man, so he hadn't got the time really to give me the in-depth knowledge. It takes a long time. So basically, he organised and set up with his senior training brother for me to go over.
Wow!
So we rocked over, and that was it. And met my C-Toy back, and as you say, the rest is history. We pretty much gelled straight away. Had a commonality in the sense that we just loved Kung Fu. I always remember one of the students over there saying to me, "Are you going to go out and have a drink with him later?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, we got to warn you." That he said, "This guy will just not shut up talking about Kung Fu from the time you go out to the time you go home." And I was like, absolutely perfect, because that's me all over. So pretty much the group was just found the corner and just talked Kung Fu all night, you know, and it's been like that ever since, you know. And if I'm being honest, sometimes I get the best little nuggets off and during them conversations, you know.
Yeah, you learn a lot from. So, what was it like? What was it like going to Hong Kong for the first time? I mean, what was your first meeting like with your C-Tai buck, and how did it go? And like, did he ask you to perform? Like, how did it go? What was it like?
The first time was pretty quiet, because the first time I went out, my C-Toy Gong, my great grandmaster was still alive.
Right.
Chung. So getting back to the lineage, as I said, pretty much after Lammy Kwai, we had Lammy Kwai's second son, his second eldest son, Lam Chang Kwan.
Right.
Was my lineage, and then it was passed down to Chu Chung.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, Chu Chung, very famous guy, even to this day in Hong Kong, particularly in these areas, in Yulong. If I go out for a drink in Yulong, there's still, you know, Mantis guys there, Pac Me guys that will mention, you know, your great grandmaster was the absolute business, you know, and he's still got a big reputation, you know, in terms of, you know, winning challenges and all that type of stuff. So when I went over, he was still alive, so, and he was quite elderly at the time, and he passed in 2004 now, I think. So I got to meet him, which was lovely, and I'd have loved to, you know him better, but I didn't, unfortunately. After he passed, I suppose, is really when I, you know, start going to Hong Kong more seriously and training with Seaback Gong. Training with Seaback Gong it is what it is. It's just brilliant. His attention to detail, I suppose, is unbelievable. The stuff he'll pick you up on that other people will let you away with is just, you know, little minute stuff that you go, you know, it's so important, but he won't miss it. And he'll pick you up on everything, and he refines everything to a fine detail. And, you know, even when I go to the duels when I'm over there, and every time I'm over there, we regularly go to these duels where you got, you know, a couple of hundred people, 1,000 people in the hall from all different, you know, Kung Fu systems across Hong Kong. People would always say to me, you know, who's instructing you now? And I'd say, it's my Seaback Gong is teaching me now at the minute. And I've had many people say to me now, many other Kung Fu masters, do you know how lucky you are? Which I do. Because they would always refer to him as a professor. Because that's the best way they can, you know, put it in English. They would always say, when it comes to fighting application, you know, you're not going to get anyone better. This guy is a professor. He knows his stuff. So yeah, that's basically it. So the training with him, very, very hard. First time I went there, he asked me to perform every set I knew. Like most of them, you know, he got this poker face. Don't give much of it. So you don't know whether you're absolute shit or, you know, he's completely over the moon with you. So, but he was happy at the end of it all. We struck up a good relationship. He showed me what was wrong and what needed to be fixed, and we worked hard on it. I remember the first time I was there for 2.5 weeks, and I remember after 3 days, Again, one of my seaback guns, another seaback gun, a very successful businessman in Hong Kong. He had his own premises there where we go and train. And he's got these 2-story steel containers, shipping containers converted into living quarters. And I would stay there when we go over. And I remember, after day 3 of training, coming out of the bedroom, I got the phone call to say, listen, I see back guns on the way, let's go train. He's going to be downstairs in 20 minutes. So I got up and basically had to crawl like a snake, warm down the stairs because I couldn't walk. And I was training really hard at this point. I was training for years. I would have considered myself a very fit guy, fairly trim, kept myself physically and mentally fit. But I couldn't walk. I just couldn't walk. And I had to, get down before they came down because I didn't want to be embarrassed. And basically just get the stance going and just get some movement in the legs again, just getting rid of the lactic acid. And once I warmed up, I was fine. You got the temperature over in Hong Kong, you just start moving again. But I literally couldn't walk. I just, as you say, warmed down the stairs. So pretty hard training, it's unforgiving. It's tough training, but you reap the reward.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you, how important is the conditioning in the system?
Yeah, conditioning is very important, but I would say only on certain parts of the body.
Right.
So we probably wouldn't practice as much orange short or anything like that yous would. From what I've seen, yous do a lot of it. Yeah, we wouldn't do much of that. So I know yous would do the full torso, the back, the neck.
Yeah.
We pretty much focus a lot on forearms. Forearms they're very, very important in the lung system. If you read that about it anywhere, you'll always see that. Forearms are very important. So once the forearm's conditioned, we use it a lot.
Sure.
Because it's a close to range system. As I say, designed purely for fighting. We use the forearms a lot up close. So we use a lot of things like we use the bones here to smash down on the foreheads. We use the forearms around the neck and that to crank the neck. So we grab one hand and crank the neck. So things like that. So the forearms very important. Shins, we do quite a bit of legs. We'll condition the shins as well because we use some low kicks, low sweeps. So that's pretty much it. I suppose the most important is the forearms and the hands.
Interesting. Yeah.
Again, just in terms of even anatomy, one thing that I've noticed that separates, I suppose, Lung Ying practitioners from some other systems I've seen, but not them all, is a lot of high-level guys have got very, very big forearms, very strong, thick-set wrists, big hands.
Yeah.
When you can see the forearms they were walked.
Yeah.
So even the guys, some of my seniors in Hong Kong that would be slight built, even though they wouldn't have huge forearms, the forearms they'd have a rope-like effect on them, and they'd be fairly conditioned, fairly hard.
Yeah. I know that one. Yeah.
Do you do any iron shirt training? Is there any internal stuff for the iron shirt that you do? Or?
Not so much. No, very little. We have some punches and some, but not so much. Not to the level you guys would. I suppose the difference being is the premises everything is you got to know how to get heat. You got to be able to solve power. But we try to deflect a lot. We try and parry a lot.
Yeah.
When the fight starts, we try and use that sinking motion. So we try and concave a lot. So I know I've seen you guys hold their arms a bit higher. So having the orange short is good. We tend to hold them very close to the ribs, so we're a bit shorter range. Right. We're only fist distance off the ribs, such. And again, I've heard some funny stories about some of the masters in Hong Kong that I don't know if you've ever heard of a game called Mahjong.
Yeah.
So some of the masters were saying we'll go out and go to the parks to play Mahjong, and they'd stand in the horse stance or whatever, they'd condition the legs, and they'd put their hands out to play the Mahjong like so.
Yeah.
We'll pretty much be in this position all day, making sure that the forearms are kept in, the elbows are down, offset off the ribs. So, for these guys, the conditioning will be unbelievable.
Yeah. Too worried about losing money. the stance, playing Mahjong. Kurt, there's a question there from Mark Roberts. It says, "Hi Kurt, I read I think on a forum many years ago, that Lung Ying used to have and use the Phoenix Eye Fist, but that it was taken out. Do you know if that's true?
Yeah, I've heard similar. Yeah, so definitely I've heard similar that Mark's heard. But to be perfectly honest, I'm not true. I'm not sure of the truth in it, whether it's factual or not.
So
So
you
that's
don't use,
it's never come up.
you
It's
don't
never
use
come up in
Phoenix,
conversation in Hong Kong. We certainly don't use it.
right?
I haven't seen any other lineages across Hong Kong or in China when I'm out there using it. So, well, I'm sure it could possibly be true. I know it's definitely the chosen weapon of the Back Me guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there would have been that kind of sharing of stuff, maybe, you know.
Yeah, we pretty much. I mean, our hands. What we would use is obviously we use the fist and we use the reverse fist, like a panther fist. But we use the open hand a lot. So we use a lot of the heel of the palm. We use the fingers a lot. So we use a lot of bilgy. We use a lot of snake hands. We use gripping and seizing. So there's quite a few locks hidden in the system as well. Locks and breaks and seizing and all that type of stuff. So, but so
forearms.
And forearms up close, yeah, absolutely. Once the fight becomes very up close, the forearms then is your weapon. So most of the techniques, for argument's sake, we got a boy game comes in this way.
Yeah.
It can be used to use the side of the hand as a hammer shot. We can also use the bone.
Yeah.
So it depends on what range you're at. And ranges change, as we all know. Anybody that's had a real fight, the guy can be 5 feet away and pretty quickly he can be right in on top of you, so you adapt.
Right. Interesting.
Do you make a real emphasis on shock power, or is that, or are you more just a relaxed, heavy power that you use with your fluidity?
No, the shock power is there, but we use it slightly different. So as you say, it's there has to be power or snap on the end of each movement.
Yeah.
But we don't stop. It's hard to explain without you seeing it. So
I think I get it. Yeah.
It keeps moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've got to have the power there. You've got to be able to create the gain, as they say. But
yeah.
But the hand keeps moving. So like Lung Ying would pretty much be
you beat
down on the ankle, it's over.
Yeah, like you were saying, you continuously move. You continuously.
Yeah, you're constantly recycling. And I mean, even with the side Q, even in the side Q form, depending on the lineage, we do it 3 times. Some people do it 5 times. So you'll do the same move: break bridge, bang, keep going on. The guy is pretty much dealt with. So it's that short snap power. Whereas you say with the back knee, from what I've seen, is they emphasise the power more. Each movement is very singular and really strong, so it's just a different way of expressing the power.
Yeah. Do you do any specific training to develop that the gangtan, the shock power?
Yeah, well, basically it's just the swallow and spit with the correct body mechanics. So it's constantly drilling.
Whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and there's no secret, as you say. I mean, you're not going to go to any master anywhere in the world, but I don't think you will, that's going to say, come to me and I'll teach you shock power. No. I'm sure you will, but he won't teach you in an instance. You've got to have to study, and it's going to come after a while. I mean, if you look at shock power and you look at how the bodies generate the shock power, how the chi is being transmitted, how you explode the movement, everything is relying on tendon power rather than muscle.
Yeah.
So really what you got to do is get away from the physical, and that's going to take time, because when we all start training, it's all about the muscle power.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and then it's going to take years to develop that elasticity in the tendons.
Yeah.
Where you've got long, strong sinews, I suppose, where you become very sinewy, that you can, if that's correct, 40. You can explode without, and the tendons do what you need to do,
And then when you think you've actually got it, then you realise you haven't, and you have to start again and keep going. Absolutely,
and even when you do get it, there's always going to be somebody that you look at and think, well, he's got it much better than me.
Yeah.
Different levels of everything, and so you just got to keep going. And everybody's going to be as good as everybody can be. I mean, we're all very different, and we all, even though you do a system, we all slightly express it differently. Well, at least I think we do.
Yeah.
You got to work with your, and that's why I said that even with the intro that I thought I found a system that works with my body mechanics.
Yeah.
You got to work with your own body mechanics and find something that's a fit. And if it doesn't fit and it doesn't work, then you're never going to get there.
Yeah. Do you so with, if I use Chagar Mantis as an example, we have certain two-man training exercises, and they're there to build power, and that power can be described as however you want. So if I take this for example, you've got grinding arm, tricep, you've seen, we've got Doijong, which is builds the 4 powers. So does Lung Ying have those sort of two-man sets where it's specifically built on building that tendon ligament power?
No, not as such. Not in my lineage. I mean, we do have man-to-man training where, as you say, we drill techniques on each other, and there's a number of combos that we do. Simple ones going from Santung, changing around into Cowpeck and so on. So we do drill them, but we would tend to drill them more at almost full speed.
Sure.
So,
more of a fighting application.
More of a fighting application, yeah. There is some two-man forms, I think, in some of the lineages of Lung Ying. I've seen bits and pieces with, spear and, spear versus Shundao and shield and things like this. How original they are, I honestly don't know. My own personal feeling is that some of these came from, the influence of Wushu curriculum. Right. I mean, pretty much the Wushu curriculum was pushed very heavily in China, as we know. So some of the stuff to me looks more a bit Wushu-y, but yeah, no, we don't got them. We just drill the techniques,
Okay, but do you have like traditional two-man sets that are focused on learning techniques and combinations as well?
No. We just actually, it's up to the Sifu. So we basically just take the techniques, break them down, and we use them in whatever application. Generally, the way I was taught, we pretty much do the same thing in Hong Kong. It's pretty much, okay, what do you want to deal with? So it's like, okay, you're fighting an MMA guy, you're fighting a professional boxer, you're fighting a Hungarian guy, you're fighting a Mantis guy, whatever. Okay, we know how they move, we know how this guy moves. At least we think we have an understanding. How would you deal with them? And that's how we train them.
Yep.
So we break it down the best we can, and we just drill the techniques,
If I was to say, okay, what would be 3 techniques that are Lung Ying? So if you would say, what would be 3 techniques from Mantis? I would say, okay, hammer fist as an example, Pai Q, and then maybe a Pok Jong. What would be 3 techniques that you would choose from Lung Ying to say these are my 3 go-to kind of techniques?
I'd probably push her a little bit and say we got 5.
Please.
Excellent.
If you could just show them, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, so we got this one that comes to the front, to the side, and it's pretty much based on the sinking and rising power. So we call this lambda.
Lambda, yeah.
It's probably got a different name in other systems. It's pretty similar. Then we got, everybody knows, it's the cow peck.
Yeah.
So it's basically break and strike, which is kind of a hammer fist.
I like that.
Signature technique.
Yeah.
Then we got the boy game, which is kind of, break down, trap the arm, and then come over with it like a rear shot.
Yeah.
Most of these are going from side angles, as I said, with the Lung Ying. So boy game is very important. Then we got a Santung, which is a very important move as well. And again, this is for smashing in. So we roll arms out of the way and come in and use it. Very effective movement. It comes in to break the sternum, take the side of the neck. Again, hitting the pressure point to try and cut off the air supply. So basically, dangerous technique. And then we got the Mork Cup, which is, comes from the Mork Q again, which is pretty much just a deflecting grab and a strike, a palm strike.
Very nice.
So, and again, there's just a little subtleties. Some people will call this a palm strike. We put the thumb in here. This is the way we strike. Again, the thumb can't be broke. It just adds a bit of resistance. So I would say the 5 techniques are kind of key. I remember having a conversation again with Sifu in Hong Kong, And after watching me training, he picked 3 techniques for myself, actually. He picked lambda, cowpeck, and mark up. And he said, pretty much those 3 techniques, if you fight, that's all you need.
Nice.
That's where your power is. And again, that's the whole thing of, you know, you can learn all the forms, and not to be disrespectful to anybody, some people think it's about the forms. So you'll get people that just want to be form collectors, and they'll come and, I want to learn this set off, you know, I want to learn that. And then, oh, I know 20 forms, I know 25. And really, you know, when you know all the forms, you go right back to the start, and you strip it back, and you end up with 3 movements.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You know, if you know 100 forms and there's like, you know, 200 different moves in there, you're not going to use them all in a fight, or you're doing something wrong. If you have to use them all, you know.
You focus on your strengths, you focus on the ones that you know really well, and the ones that you know you can use in a proper situation. And that's pretty much it, yeah.
We've got a question from Steve Hayes, and this also came from another person in the group. Does the system use any tools for strength apart from weapons? What training devices use for toughening, power? Do you have any of those sort of things?
Yeah, we use a couple. I suppose the first one we use, and I'll explain it the best we can, is the steel dummy. If anybody has been on my page or wherever, you've probably seen it. So when I say it's a dummy, it's in no way similar looking to the Wing Chun dummy. It's got the arms, and you know, there's an imitation man or whatever. Basically what it is a steel cylinder, so it's always made of steel. Steel cylinder will go across maybe, you know, 10 inches, 8 to 10 inches, and it's hollowed out all the way through. Maybe stands about 6 foot tall. So to mimic a man again, it'll be hollowed out, as I say, and then a large rod is driven up into the hollow out piece. And basically it's a sign that the cylinder will spin on the fixed pole.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And basically use that for what we call saw. So you probably know what saw is. It's basically pulling back.
Yeah.
So it's basically that deflecting or pulling back block.
Yeah.
So we use that to strengthen here, strengthen the bridge and what have you, and strengthen the saw movement, which we use a lot. I remember the first time actually seeing it. I'd never seen one actually, even though I was in Long Ying for so long. I'd never actually seen one when I went to Hong Kong. And I remember, you see back on the old one, I remember them hitting it, and just hearing the ping off it. It was like, boom, the thing was flying around. And I was like, wow, right, okay, what's that for? So he explained the whole lot to me. Oh, that's great, yeah, I'm going to have a bit of this. I said to him then, quite naively, I said, so how does it work? Like, is there bearings in it? He just started laughing. I was like, well, how does it move? Like, he goes, well, it's a cylinder. It's hollowed out, and it's on a steel pole. He said, and we just cement it into the ground or whatever. I was like, so do you put some, like, you know, lubricant in? Like, is there hydraulic grease or something there? He's like, what? Very quickly I realised that you had to have the power. You had to have that snapshot power.
Yeah.
That when it hit it, that you deflected it and it made it move.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it went nowhere. So it's just pure training to build up the weights, to build up the force and the movement. So yeah, we use that one. So that'd probably be one of the main ones. It's something I would use most every other day. I built one the minute I got home to Dublin. So we use that. We also use some. We use some blocks. So basically, what I have is, and it's just mimicking what I've seen in Hong Kong. I have 2 cap and stones. So if you know what a cap and stone is off the wall,
Yeah.
very heavy kind of cobble lock, and just get a nice large, whatever, 16 mil drill bit, drill out 5 holes and put your fingers in, and then just roll it up. So we use those just to straighten the grip and hold them up, and
like gripping stones. Yeah.
Yeah.
gripping stones, yeah, essentially, yeah. So we use that as well. That's pretty much it. I suppose, yeah, and everything else then is more hand conditioning. So it's more, you know, the mug bins in the buckets, the lead shot, which can be a little bit dangerous, so I don't use it anymore just because it can be toxic. So
Yeah.
I've come up with a good system now where I just basically went out and bought a load of marbles and I just punched them. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, just marbles, glass marbles, and you work every bit as effective. You drive your fingers into them, drive your knuckles into them, they're really useful.
Yeah.
And then I got beach stones. I'll always go down the beach and pick up beach stones and what have you, and they're quite useful. You'll bang them around for a while, then you'll end up snapping them, and off you go and get another one. So yeah, that's pretty much it, you know.
Thank you. So, how does Lung Ying develop in later stages? How has it developed for you? I mean, what do you emphasize more on now than you did when you were 19?
Yeah, well, I suppose it comes back to what I said there a while back. Is the 4 stages really? So it's basically once you get to a certain level, you start focusing on that expert level, where you know you've done your advanced stuff. You know you can do the forms to a reasonable level. You know you have the body mechanics pretty much pinned down, and then it's that expert level. It's all the little small pieces. Refining them. Yeah, that's really it. That's where it develops. I suppose as you become more senior in it, the form becomes more internal. And again, not to give anybody a false impression here, because, and again, it depends on the lineage. I've seen different stuff, but I know certainly the way my C-back moves and my C-gung is, I mean, these are guys that are, I think my C-back gung is almost 70, and my C-gung is just over 70, and they still move with the speed and the power of, very ferocious, They still look like young warriors, basically. So I don't want to give the false impression when I say it gets more internal that it becomes very soft.
Yeah.
It doesn't turn into, a Tai Chi form, and that's no disrespect to Tai Chi, but it's not a soft form.
It's more fluid.
It's just more fluid, and you become better, as you say, at, I suppose, developing the Chi and reserving the Chi.
Yeah.
So you become better, basically more fluid with your movement, more. The moves are smaller and snappier, so you use less energy, I suppose. It becomes sharper. So naturally, then it becomes more internal and less physical. As I say, you're using that kind of whipping tendon power. So I don't know if you can see me, but again, something we would practice is you get up in the morning, you'd be pretty much just like whacking the arm out, where you just whack the arm out, just let it go out like a sling, just bang, whack it out, loosen up all the joints in the arms, snap that out. And that's developing the tendon power rather than that stiff, static kind of, power. We don't want that. We want that short, snappy, flicky power. Sure. So that's where I think it goes at an advanced level. That's how it changes. It just becomes crisper and more refined.
I did have a question. We've covered this already, but it's a question from Jason here from South Africa. He said he's sorry joined late. Did we discuss a foundational Qigong form in the system like Sambajin, like Sanchin? And we've covered it already, but just to reiterate, it's all that kind of Qi, the Heigong stuff, is throughout all your forms, throughout all the training that you do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So it's pretty much, as you say, it's not like a rite of passage. You've got to train the hard stuff when you start off all the way up onto. You naturally become, and I don't want to use the word soft because it's not right. You become more internal.
Yes.
And I suppose the basic set is where it all starts, which is the Sukhadung. That's where the whole foundation is based, as I say, the stance and the movement.
I think in Mantis we talk about the power generation, and it's always difficult when you talk about words like power and soft and hard, and because they have different subtle meanings, don't they? But in terms of the generation of the power, it's like it starts off with your raw natural power, and you have to train at that level and build that and utilize that, and then it starts to become refined, and you start to build your stamina power. You're able to kind of train longer and with less effort because it's becoming refined, and then it starts to become internalized and hidden in the goes into the joints, as we say, and I think that's what you're describing. It's the same process of refinement of power.
Yeah, exactly, Alex. And like as I say, I mean, again, I use the two examples because I suppose they're kind of well, I suppose idols of mine, if I'm being honest, my Back Gong and my Gong in London. I watched them both perform, and I mean, I was only recently in London at my last year, I think, at my Gong's 70th birthday, and he got up and performed, and after, I'm still shocked thinking about it. I thought this guy's, well, he's 70, and he just absolutely from nothing, from 0 miles an hour to 120. He's bang, he's gone, and the power is just, he leaves it all out there, and then he's done. He's just so powerful. So it doesn't get soft. It becomes easier. It becomes internal. Something that your body is trained to do and adapts to. So you can pretty much, like flicking a switch, you can go from nothing to, as I say, a million miles an hour.
Yeah. Excellent.
So we had a question posted earlier. So does Lung Ying involve grappling techniques?
Yeah.
And do you have much in the way of floor work?
Not as such grappling, not grappling in the classical kind of, jiu-jitsu type stuff. No, as I say, we have a lot of kind of China based stuff. So we do a lot of season, locking, breaks, all that type of stuff. So we'd have quite a lot of that. Ground fighting, not so much. We do have stances where you kind of go to ground and teach you how to fight your way back up, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Well, I suppose the idea or the premise behind the system is that, as I say, it's not MMA. It's not sport karate. It's not designed for competition. It was designed for fighting multiple opponents. So the idea pretty much is that if you're on your back, you're probably already in trouble. If you've got 2 or 3 guys around you, and as I say, just based on my own background, like I feel I can speak with quite a bit of knowledge in this area, that you pretty much got to stay on your feet.
Yeah.
And if you are going to, again, something that a lot of Kung Fu systems don't deal with, that they're very stiff. Again, if you don't have that lateral movement, that head movement, if you can't get out of the way, or the classical term, I suppose, is in boxing is out to ride a punch. Yeah. If you can't take the power and go with it and come back, you're pretty much not going to last. So ground fighting, now while I have great respect for guys that do ground fighting, because it's an art all in itself, it's a specific skill set, and I think it works within specific rules, within a set rule.
Yeah, but it's interesting what you said. The fact with Dragon, you have techniques where you're taught to get up from the ground and continue attacking. You have stance work or techniques where you're starting from the ground, or you're going to the ground and you're coming up and you're moving. So, Yeah,
so we would have kind of crouching stances as well, for want of a better term, where you either down on one knee or both knees, where you pretty much you're taught how to step up correctly and how to go from a very shallow base to having your foundation straight away, so you come up straight into a very deep set stance, so you're ready to go again.
Yeah,
and things like that are quite useful for, as I say, if you get chin, and on occasion I've been on the end of some good smacks where you see the butterflies and you go down for a second, but you got to get back up.
Yeah,
and that's the reality of actual combat. So. Yeah, that's basically, in a nutshell, as I say, niche. We wouldn't really have ground fighting as in,
It's interesting, coming back to the point you said around movement, and how Lung Ying is very focused on that very fluid movement and head movement and movement all together, which I find very interesting. So do you find that Dragon is quite unique with that in terms of learning that movement? Do you find that you haven't seen that in any other kind of?
Yeah, look, I mean, based on, I think in my lineage I've been pretty lucky, if I'm being honest. And I mean, it depends. And again, it's not to knock any other lineages, because they've all got their strengths, and I've seen some great stuff out in Hong Kong. And to be honest, I've seen some not so good stuff, like he's all. I mean, we see stuff that's very impressive and stuff that's not.
Yeah.
I think I've been particularly lucky that my lineage is very, it's got a very strong fighting base. So the guys that were the guys, whether it be Lammy Kwai, very famous for combat. I mean, even Lammy Kwai, I mean, even when he was with Chun Lei Chun and with Lum Yung Tong, who was the famous Mokgar master. I mean, they actually ended up basically teaching the military in a Whampoa Academy in Guangdong. So, I mean, that's the level these guys were at, that they were respected so much for their skills. That's why they were called the Three Tigers, I suppose. They were respected so much for their skills that they were asked basically to teach the military. Yeah. So if you're at that level, you pretty much know what you're doing, because obviously in hand-to-hand combat, you don't have time to, mess around. You got to end it as quick as you can. So yeah, I suppose maybe the movement and the subtleness is maybe something that Lammy Kwai developed because he was just a very experienced fighter.
Sure.
And again, I mean, I remember recently being asked the question. Somebody asked me, which was kind of a difficult question. He asked me, "Do you think you can teach somebody to fight?" And after years and years now of teaching people, I'd have to say it's a very difficult one to answer, because I do think fighting is something that's kind of bred. It's something you have in you. Some people are naturally tough, are warriors, and can get in and do it. And not to sound terribly bad, but some people you can train for 100 years, and when it actually kicks off, they'll either fold up or run away. So can you teach somebody to fight? I would like to think you can. You can certainly teach them how to defend themselves at a pretty okay level, but to be a very proficient fighter, maybe not. So I do think the likes of Lammy Kwai was probably just a proficient fighter. I mean, he was known as being a pretty big guy anyway, for a Hakka guy.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know his exact height, but if I look at his grandson, even who I visited in Tai Po when I was over there one of the times, Lam Gok Gay, I mean, he's pretty much 5'10", and I'd say maybe 90 kilos. So he's a big Chinese guy. And Lam was meant to be a big guy, so I'd say fighting was natural for him. And then if we step it down to, I'd say my Si Tai Gung, my great grandmaster Chu Chung, again, he was very famous and very renowned, as I say, in Yulong for being well able to hold his own. Again, he was somebody that, was born in China. He came from Taishan, another area, and not too far from Waichao. And again, he travelled into China, or into Hong Kong again. And at that stage, he'd already finished the Hung Gar system. He was a very proficient fighter and a healer, a medicine guy himself, a herbal medicine practitioner. And he ended up just through a friendly, friendly exchange with one of Lammy Kwai's students, ended up training with Lam Changong. And again, a very proficient fighter. So I think some of these guys just had the skill set and was already there, and the systems just brought it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So, and that's not to sound terrible on anybody that's trained in years, but I think one of the worst things you can do as a Sifu is send a guy out with false ideas,
Yeah, I believe so as well.
Because you can get them badly hurt, Yeah. Some guys are meant for fighting and some guys are not.
Yeah.
And of course, we're in a day and age now where challenges are less for obvious reasons, because you go to jail. You've got to be careful,
Yeah, a dose of realism, a bit of humility, a dose of realism works wonders. People need to know whether they can realistically use what they're training,
So yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, some people, and again, just from my own background, say standing on some tough doors and what have you years ago, to be honest, something I should have never done, but it was something I done when I was younger and full of beans, I suppose, as you say, testosterone and young men and all that, but I've been hit with knuckle dusters, and unfortunately I was stabbed once, I've been hit with all sorts of things, and you're going to get hit. When it's multiple opponents and, and something kicks off, you're going to get hit. And people need to face that reality as well. And if you don't know how to deal with it, you're going to get a bad rude awakening, So, as I say, I know even from my own students, I know the ones that are combat ready, if you want to say, and I know the ones that it's pretty much, it's a hobby for them. And I would never give them false ideas that if something kicks off, you know, they're going to be the, you know.
Following that, Kurt, based on your door work and security work, did that change any of the way that you teach, train Lung Ying?
Yeah, I would say it definitely influenced it.
Yeah,
absolutely. I suppose my style of teaching is more, it's more direct and more honest. I'll probably do a lot more sparring and a lot of skills. There's always the possibility that you might lead to skill or bloody nose, you know? So I'm not going to lie, the training's hard. But for those who want to, and I don't force it on everybody, there's some people that just want to come for the workouts, some people want to come for the forms.
Yeah.
But for the ones that want to learn how to fight, I make it very real for them. I suppose doing all the door work and seeing what I've seen and coming from a rough area and being in multiple situations, I suppose it helped me refine the style as well. And not change Lung Ying because it's all there, but maybe if I step back to where I was talking to Lamy Kwai, if you think about when he was asked to go and train the military, you know, he's got all this form set. I'm sure he didn't walk into the military camp or academy and think, you know, I'm going to teach them Sam Tung, I'm going to teach them more Q.
Yeah.
These guys are going to be drilling the form up and down the floor for hours. It's no good to them. So he's got to make them combat ready fairly quickly. So, I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but I would imagine he pretty much broke down the most efficient, dangerous, lethal techniques and gave it to them.
Yeah.
That's pretty much where I'm at with my teaching. And of course, there's always the thing about being careful, because you've got to be careful what you put into people's hands.
Sure.
So anybody that would be teaching very advanced techniques would be with me a long, long time and a very good paradigm, and nobody wouldn't use it unless they were really pressed. I mean, even going back to my days of doing door work, something that people would have found funny about me, but it's just being honest. I had a bit of a background in boxing as well. I have a lot of good friends in boxing that, you know, were coaches and coached the Olympic team and stuff like that. And, you know, we've got good reputation as boxers in Ireland. But I would just use Western boxing most of the times when I was doing door work. There's very few occasions where I felt the requirement to use the Lung Ying. I would only use it if I felt my life was threatened, to be honest. So if weapons were involved, I would absolutely use it. But I think it's a dangerous style. And I think if you know how to use it and you try and harder, you could do a lot of damage very quickly and be in a situation. So again, restraint is very important. So yeah, I would just use Western boxing, and I pretty much always had a good punch. So, I mean, you lay someone out, it's good enough, job done. But yeah, the Lung Ying is, I would say my focus is a little bit more refined maybe than some other skills based on me experiences, you know.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, so we've got a bit of time, and Alex and I really want to move on to the healing and the traditional healing stuff that you do. So it'd be really good to learn how you learned that, and I know that you do a lot of healing in Qigong. So yeah, let's talk about that. So were you learning the and I assume the medicine you learned from Lung Ying?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I suppose there's a couple of things about the medicine. To learn it properly, you're not going to learn it in a kung fu class. That's the reality of it. You'll pick up bits and pieces. We all know what Didar is, so we got the Didar, which is, you know, it's basic level, if I'm being honest, basic level herbal medicine. You know, when you take a couple of herbs, you're basically looking at, you know, moving blood, nourishing tendon and ligament and bone, regrowing bone cell and that type of stuff, stopping inflammation, stopping bruise. And it's predominantly, you know, associated with martial arts. So you learn to do that off most good Sifus. Most of them have knowledge of it. And most guilds have their own. Sorry, Mish?
Does Lung Ying have its own unique Ditdar
form? Yeah, we would, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And again, you will see, you know, there might be one for the style, but there might be also one for different lineages where different masters have adapted the formula slightly, which is absolutely fine. I mean, even as a herbalist myself, that's the first thing you're taught. is, you know, you need to modify or adapt it based on the patient. Well,
Yeah.
because we're all different, you know, we all heal differently. We've all got different, you know, different systems. So yeah, so you learn that off any Sifu pretty much, you know. That's Woody's weight, as they say, you know. But then if you want to go a little bit deeper into a proper herbal medicine, and you know, I'm a qualified acupuncturist and herbalist, and tween art practitioner and what have you, and a number of other things. So many things now. I've got far too many letters after my name. But if you want to learn it, you've got to study. So I mean, I've pretty much done. I think now at this stage, there's a couple of diplomas and a couple of degrees, and you can go on higher if you want. You can do a master's and you can do a doctorate and all that type of stuff.
Sure.
But I've done pretty much what I want to do, and I've spent a long time and many years studying it. So you got to do it right. So basically, to be honest, what happened was when I was out in Hong Kong, and also based on the influence that my Sigun would have given me in London, because he was also a bone setter. I realised that all the older Kung Fu generation were all in some way healers. They were all either bone setters, herbalists, acupuncturists, whatever the case may be. Even my great grandmaster Chi Chung, he was a healer as well. He was a herbalist, he was a devout Taoist, and you know, he had his own clinic alongside his Kung Fu practice. And you know, I asked the guys about it in Hong Kong, and they were very forthcoming and saying, look, Kurt, you know, we're not going to teach you in the 3 weeks you come over here. We can show you bits and pieces. So basically, I made a contact back here way back in 2003. I was very lucky. There was a Chinese professor living here in New Orleans, who's only moved back recently, Professor Song, Jason Song, and he was a good friend of mine. Oddly enough, he was actually a Tonglong practitioner. He was actually, he'd done some Mantis. And was from southern China. So, you know, we were always talking Kung Fu and bits and pieces and herbs. And so basically I ended up studying under him for a long time, and pretty much knew the herbs really, really well, and the acupuncture. And then went and made a formalist. I was formalised by going to college over here. So one of the major skills there. And done a degree in acupuncture initially, then a diploma and degree in herbal medicine, so on. So we know. Yeah. And now it's pretty much my full-time living. Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Professor Song was moving back to China. He made his money over here. He's a successful guy. He was the main Chinese herbalist in Ireland, in the sense that he ran a pharmacy. So basically, he had all the pill-making machines. So we grind down the herbs, make them into pill format, sell them as formulas. So basically, I bought him out with all his business when he moved on, and bought his books and all his formulas. So that's pretty much what I do full time now. And thank God it's been going really, really well. I've been very successful with it, you know.
Oh, well, fantastic.
So you bought all his formulas as well?
Yeah, well, he had a lot of formulas that were kind of patents to him.
He's
slightly adjusted herbs and dosages and what have you on what we call classical formulas.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could treat a whole host of things, everything. To be honest, herbal medicine. I suppose in China, herbal medicine is the go-to. People think acupuncture on this side of the world, but in actual fact, acupuncture is seen as inferior to herbal medicine in China.
Right.
The reach for the herbs first, and then the acupuncture is kind of a boost. It's secondary.
Yeah.
Some people on this side of the world might dispute that. That's absolutely a fact if you go to China, you know.
Yeah.
So I bought these formulas, and we had a lot of them, and as I said, it's been going really, really good, you know. And it was I mean, I knew all the herbs and I knew everything pretty much really well, because once I applied myself to something pretty much like the Kung Fu, I given me all. But it was still a good learning curve taking over the business.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great.
What are out of interest, what are some of the most frequent injuries that you're seeing or you're asked to kind of heal? Back, shoulders, neck? Yeah,
I suppose since I've gone full time with the acupuncture, I suppose and the herbs, I suppose the two, and I suppose if I'm being honest, I'd be more popular now for me tweener. I think the reason why is the professor that trained me in tweener is Professor Ming. He's from Beijing, and the first thing he got us to do in the class, which sounds funny, was to do some finger push-ups. So he wanted to see what strength you had, because you've got to be very strong to do tween arm. It doesn't really work if you don't get into the...
You were like this. Oh, I've got this.
One hand, which hand first?
Which finger?
So again, yeah. So again, I've got quite strong hands. So I know about showing him some, single finger push-ups kind of thing, and he was well impressed. So I think I've become more popular now for tween arm. So so between the acupuncture and tween arm, I'd say musculoskeletal issues in general. So whether it be, frozen shoulder, hip trouble, knee trouble, back, doesn't really matter. Once I get in with the tween arm, once I get in with the techniques with the fingers, the tween arm techniques, and a bit of acupuncture, it's pretty much sorted within maybe 2 to 3 sessions for most people. And then pretty much I treat everything. I mean, it's a mixed bag during the day, so I do everything from, fertility for a woman, like people that want to get pregnant, they might be using IVF, and they'll use the acupuncture as a boost as well. So everything, people suffering from insomnia, depression, there's a lot of that in Dublin at the minute, unfortunately, because of trouble. If I'm being honest, I see a lot of people over here, there's a lot of the youth, which is very unfortunate, not them all, I don't want to paint everybody, but there's a lot of young people here that have turned to cocaine use, which is, to me, is very, very sad, but it seems to be the popular drug, now. It's the one that the lads go out on the weekend, and if you don't have it when you go for a drink, they're almost like, the black sheep. They're expected to do it.
Yeah.
So you get the after effects of that coming into the clinic, which inevitably is depression, anxiety, palpitations in the heart, all sorts of things. So I would treat a lot of things like that,
Wow.
Oh, that's very, very interesting as well. Yeah, I think that kind of drug use thing is endemic all over big cities now, everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say in big cities it's pretty much everywhere, and that's why I thank my lucky stars, even on the age I am, that I've missed all that era. To be honest, drugs was never my thing. I never done them. I do like a drink, most people know, but I never bothered with drugs. And I'm glad at the age I am, as you say, and I'm glad at the age I am that, I've been offered and enticed to go back and do dog work, but absolutely not.
No.
Because once the drugs are out there, it's a different ball game,
Oh, it is. It is. It's like, it's not a safe place. I think Dorman, they've had a bad reputation in the past, being untrained, etc. They've tried to improve that. They need to improve the pay of people on the door, because they're taking their lives in their hands, daily working nowadays.
I mean, I would have got out of it. I can't remember exactly when it was now, but I'm going to guess that it was probably about 12 years ago. And at the stage I got out of it, it was already starting to get really rough. As I say, I had a misfortune to be stabbed once.
Wow.
Myself and another colleague were walking one day, and again, we were very, very, very lucky that we had just, put somebody out, locked the doors, and basically the guy shot through the doors, and we were very, very lucky. So it's a rough job. It's not one that I'd ever want to do again in my life. I've great respect for the guys that are doing it and doing it proper out there now. As I say, it's a rough living, and once drugs are involved, people will pick up weapons much more easily, And I know London's got a real issue over there now with knife crime and what have you, and we're not far behind you. So I'm glad I'm the age I am.
and it's a good kind of career move for you to be doing the TCM stuff.
The healing side, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something else that's quite interesting. It's just popped into my head, because something else I do for a couple of corporates is I do self-defense classes, and they're quite good. I run a 12-week course, and basically I just take out the Ying where I think is, really effective, and that will work for people that are not trained. So they don't really need any training. They're just going to be able to use it. And again, something that really vexes me or, gets me back up is when I see all these knife defense videos on YouTube and on Facebook. And I mean, they're farcical, most of them. Actually, nearly a whole lot of them. Because speaking from, experience and speaking from reality, if somebody attacks you with a knife, every time he gets lucky, you'll get cut. So pretty much there's not much defense against it. you got to get out of there. And some of the stupid offences, it's going to get people killed.
Scary, isn't it? Yeah, scary what you see some people doing as a knife defence. It's craziness, you know.
Crazy.
We've got a question on the group from Amy. Do you feel that more people are becoming open to TCM, and is it more
a specific age group, or are older people turning to it as well?
I would say certainly. I mean, I can only speak for the Irish market. In Ireland, absolutely. People are really into the alternative. I mean, it doesn't have to be only TCM. It could be Reiki, energy healing. It could be biohealing, whatever the case may be. I think the younger people in particular are very attuned with it and very into it, and realise that it does work very well. A lot of people want to get away from the whole pharmaceuticals, and they know the negative effects they can have as well. I mean, look, Western medicine is good for what it's good for, as they say, but it's not everything. And the alternative sometimes is the better choice.
Is that? Do you find? Is it because Dublin is a hip city that people are more tuned into this alternative stuff, or is it all over Ireland? Do you think that's
it's pretty much all over Ireland, because I'd have customers that are nationwide. So basically, the way I would work is TCM doctors over here, so traditional Chinese medicine doctors will see their clients, they'll prescribe something for them, and then they'll email in the prescription to me and I'll make it up.
Right.
So, because I'm more or less a pharmacy, as I say, so I'm the only one here. So pretty much, it's nationwide. And I think it's just young people, as I say. I think it's the influence of the internet, if I'm honest, and the easy availability of information. I suppose older people are more skeptical, and they've been told, you need to go see a GP, you need to go to your doctor, you need to take this, you got blood pressure, you need this, whatever the case may be. As young people now are a little bit more informed, they know what certain meds can do to them, and they have choice and they exercise it. So I think the young people are better, they're more tuned into what's good for them.
Nice.
I've got something quite funny to tell you. It was before you jumped on. I was speaking to Kurt and I said, "Oh, where did you stay when you were in London?" He said, "Oh yeah, I spent some time in Kingsbury," and he said, "And then I spent some time in Southgate. It was a bit rough."
Sorry,
it was a bit rough. I was like,
"Yeah, you need to come to Wood Green next time you come." Actually,
I've been in Wood Green quite a few times.
It's lovely here.
So for those that don't know, Kurt has lived in London, and he lived in North London, not too far from where Alex and I live.
Brilliant. Kurt, is there a dragon school in London connected with you?
There is. I think they're temporarily closed now, as far as I know.
Because of this.
I had a school down in Leighton, under my under one of my seniors, who was Kit. He was running the school down there. He's a very, very good guy. Anybody who's been down to Chinatown for the Chinese New Year's will know him. Excellent 9-dance skill. They're really, really effective, really, really good.
Excellent.
But they were down in Leighton, and again, I think there was maybe some issues with leases and things going up. So I had to basically knock it on the head for a while. But so they're I think they're still operating somewhere.
Yeah, I think I spoke to someone recently. Just that I think it's Hemel Hempstead. There's a school there, Dragon School, because. And I saw an advert for somewhere in Southgate, funnily enough. So I will check those anyway. It'd be nice to go and visit a school and say hello as well.
A couple of guys around, I'm not too sure. I mean, pretty much with my lineage, it was pretty much just the Irish skill. So you got all these Irish guys, and then you've got pretty much just Chinese guys predominantly in London. So they would have been kind of the guys that I knew were mostly all Chinese, and then the Hong Kong skills. So I'm not sure. I know there is some other skills in the UK. I know you got Tom Braithwaite over there, who's well known. I'm not sure where he is, maybe Surrey or something.
I know.
Then you got some guys up in, maybe it's Norwich as well. You got some
Yeah,
guys.
I've seen Tom's stuff as well. He's quite good. Yeah. I liked what I saw there. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Fantastic. So
Time is now 9 o'clock.
yeah, we've come up to 2 hours and it's gone really quickly.
Blown past.
Yeah, that went pretty quick, guys. Yeah.
So from both Alex and I, Kurt, thank you for joining us and giving us more insight into Southern Dragon and Lung Ying. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure
Yeah.
totally. We will post up your details, website, anything so people can find you. We'll share those out on the group. Yeah, I mean, thank you. That was a good talk, and definitely we look forward to coming down to Dublin for a couple of beers. And
yeah, that would be great once all this craziness has stopped.
Absolutely was, yeah. Look, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope I managed to get through most of the questions.
You did, yeah. Brilliantly. Thank you very much. And yeah, if you want to kind of post your details or give us your details to post up, we're happy to do that on the web page as well and spread the news.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I say, I run a full-time school over here. I've had a full-time school for a long time now. So anybody who wants to, anybody's local, anybody wants to train me, you can feel free.
Yeah.
I've also got a couple of international students. I've got a lad over in Brazil. I've got a lad in Scotland. So, I teach over the field as well. So if anybody wants to hook up.
Yeah, we're happy to share that. And I'm sure there'll be people interested. So that was fantastic. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your time as well. Yeah, cheers, Kurt.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
all right, I've stopped now, so we're not streaming anymore.
Cool. Cheers, Kurt.